Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And today we're not talking about a film. We're talking about an event that's on at Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery until the 30th of October this year, called Wonderland, Birmingham Cinema Stories. This is set up, organised by Flatpack.
Yes.
Who do all that brilliant work around Birmingham.
It's curated by Ian Francis and Felicity McWilliams, and it's designed by Keith Dodds. And I think the design is fantastic in my view.
Yeah, so it's one big room at BMAG, and it shows a history of cinema in Birmingham, including a big central display, which is wonderful, this kind of diorama display of a map of Birmingham that lights up when you press buttons that show you where all the cinemas were in 1915, I can't remember the next year.
Oh God, 1940, 1984, and the present.
That's right. And 1984 is where the big slump is. One of the things on the wall said that during the height of cinema in Birmingham in the 40s, I think a yearly audience was something like 1.5 billion.
Wow.
And in 1986, it was 54 million, which is a difference of about 1.5 billion. And today, there aren't that many more cinemas than there were in 1986, but the attendance is up, and the cinemas are specialised. So we're going to the Electric later, and the Electric's obviously the oldest working cinema in the country, as they're very fond of talking about, and that has its own little section. It has also 3 old seats from the 1980s that you were sitting in.
Yes.
That are nice and tatty.
Yes, I was tired waiting for you. So shall we begin in order? Because one of the things that really impressed me about the exhibition is, on the one hand, it's chronological, right? But it highlights different personalities of different periods, and it's very democratic in doing so. Yes, so some are very famous, like, Ken Wall, who owned cinemas, and, Iris Barry, who became, a very important female film critic, right? But then also, like, projectionists, and kind of people who worked at the cinemas and so on. So it doesn't just highlight celebrities, So I love that aspect. The exhibition is at once a history of cinemas in Birmingham, a history of film going, right? So it's part social history. It connects it to all the major movements. It has the technological developments. It locates it kind of in the city, right? So, some of the lenses, some of the dioramas, were originated here. They were built and manufactured here. So I love that it's, it's at once linear, but it combines all of these different elements, that happen simultaneously, and that are local, and obviously that are also national and international. So I think that's one of the successes of the exhibition for me.
Yeah, and those people that it highlights have their own special section on that map in the middle, and you can light up these 10 lights that are these people, these stories that you've read on the walls around the room. This is where these people were located. And I think one of the biggest is Oscar Deutsch.
Yes.
As well, he has a big place because he created the Odeon cinemas, which was a huge cinema chain, and famously, he was from Birmingham. He was of Hungarian and Jewish descent, but born in Balsall Heath, I think he said.
So the exhibition is divided into sections, right? So the first one is Travelling Light, and that's because a lot of the first showings of cinema in Birmingham were travelling shows or circus shows or, in vaudeville type of circus situations. So it shows that. Then it highlights the picture palaces, and what's interesting is that these are all like post-war, to sound, huge cinemas built in the city. And then it goes to the super cinemas. And actually, one of the things that I loved in that part of the exhibition, what I loved in all the parts of the exhibition was photographs of the pictures of the cinemas, where they were located, and a little bit of a potted history. But what I loved about this 1940, it actually has a bill of what's playing in Birmingham that week, and it's from 1940, and it's such an interesting thing because I remember when I moved to England, I kept looking for the newspaper to see that, because in Canada, that's what it was. Like, the newspapers had like a weekly listing of all what the cinemas were showing, but by that point in Birmingham they didn't, right? They only had the times of the cinemas that advertised, that paid for the advertising, right? So anyway, and it was fascinating to see what was playing in Birmingham in 1940. There was a huge range of shows, adventure films and a Hitchcock, and kind of an incredible range of things to see that weekend. So I loved just kind of seeing the newspaper ad, actually, the newspaper sheet. And then it goes on to another section, which is the slow fade. So this is the post-war cinemas beginning to close down. And then it follows that with new beginnings, because as cinemas were demolished and, they were beginning to close down, and it has bits of Cinerama in 3D and, kind of how that played out in Birmingham. But then it also shows how new influx of immigrants created different audiences, right? So, you get black cinemas, and you get Asian cinemas, and you get Kung Fu cinemas, and so on, right? So that was, I thought, pretty fascinating. And it also has a little bit of the history of the art cinema, the arts lab, the connection of, art cinema to porn. A lot of those cinemas that were built to show art films in the late 50s, by the 1970s were subsisting on porn.
The Electric was showing sex movies for a while.
Yes, for quite a while. Yeah, that's how it survived.
And then it says was it in the 80s it said the upstairs screen was still showing the blue movies and downstairs was showing regular movies, which must be an interesting interplay between the two audiences.
Oh my God. I remember, in the 90s, it was so decrepit. I did a lot of talks there, actually. And I remember doing an interview with Martin Sherman, the playwright, for Bent. When they made a film of the play Bent. And we took him on stage, and they brought out these chairs, and I sat on it, and the whole middle bit fell off, right? It was like a silent film comedy, because, it was so old and so decrepit. It had that smell of damp, So, that's a very interesting evolution on its own. One of the things that I loved about today, the exhibition today, was, first of all, it was packed for a Monday afternoon. There were so many people.
Yeah, so we saw it at 1:30, basically. Yes. And it was really full. Actually, the whole gallery was pretty full.
Yes.
But, it would be. They wouldn't just only come to this room, would they? But yeah, I was surprised at how busy it was.
I was surprised at how busy it was. The Edwardian tea rooms were packed.
Yeah.
I couldn't get a chair on a Monday afternoon. And then I also loved how kid-friendly it was, right? You had children 5, 6, and they were going crazy with the lights, and and also they have these things of make your own cinema, make your own film poster, and they have different glass things that you could get from the drawer and place on top so that you could build your own cinema. I thought that was marvelous, and it was marvelous to see kids so interested in it, actually.
When I was looking at that interactive map in the middle, this kid next to me, I was pressing the buttons for 1940, 1986, and this kid next to me was pressing the buttons, and he pressed 1915, and he goes, "Mum," he's like 8 or 9 years old. He goes, "Mum, look how many cinemas there were in Birmingham."
Yes.
And all these people, actually, the adults as well, people my age and older, were going, okay, where's King's Heath? This is where I'm. Everyone's locating themselves in the place.
Yes.
I couldn't quite, because I'm from Solihull. That's not on the map. But obviously you can still look around and work out which cinema is which, particularly in the modern day.
Yes.
And looking at all the pictures of the older cinemas, some of those facades, some of those buildings still exist. They're all not cinemas anymore. They're all wedding venues and things these days. And most of them don't exist at all. They've been demolished. They're beautiful to look at. They're really impressive buildings. They're saying this one, it was based on Moorish architecture from other cultures, and the idea that you go into these places and they transport you to a different world for a little while. You really feel that, and because that's not what Cineworld does these days.
No,
very corporate, big building.
But it's important to remember that picture palaces were like people's palaces, right? And I think the exhibition communicates that, right? So, you have these grandiose buildings that kind of scream luxury, right? You pay your ticket and you are in these palatial kind of places. And they're built for you. They're not built for the Queen, right? They're not built, it's not a stately home for the Duke of so-and-so. these are built for people, right? And they were experienced as such. That was like part of the pleasure and the joy of going to them, right?
There was also a small focus throughout the exhibition on class, and now this is entertainment for the working class. And like these penny shows in the very early days before there were cinemas, so people were paying a penny to get in, and they'd be seeing 60 people to see a short reel or something or other. And then later, as you say, these people palaces, and you get these photos of just vast audiences, and there were quotes on the wall about this was the working man's entertainment. And then later in the segment where it's talking about immigrants and their influence on the culture. There's a quote from an Asian guy, I can't remember the guy's name, but it was along the lines of, you go to these cinemas and they were full of people like you from your community, and you'd be seeing a film in Hindi or Urdu or what have you, and for 2 hours you were at home again. You know.
I also found very interesting, the accounts of censorship, right? So obviously it came in quite early, but also there was a commission, in the 1930s. About whether cinema had an influence on children's actions, right? And you realize how long these things have been going on. That it's almost like kind of this is almost like a century that you're getting these debates. I also loved seeing the uniforms. So they have.
Yes.
What did you think of that?
Well, they were quite charming. They were very of their time, weren't they? Because I immediately thought of what do people wear who work at cinemas these days, and it's like a branded shirt, and with a name tag. And these were these like full-on like Salvation Army outfits. Yeah, would go with the building, don't they? All the effort that's been put into that architecture is mirrored by the effort that goes into the clothing.
Yes, the person who did the Caribbean cinema. His name was Cecil Morris, and he arrived from Jamaica to Birmingham as a teenager in 1962. And he was the person to bring black cinema on screen in the 70s, and he also set up the Rising Star record shop. And the cinema was the Elite in Soho Road. So actually a lot of this was around Handsworth, right? And what's interesting is that the cinemas were also community organizations. So along with the posters for the films, you have meeting on, whatever, right? So a lot of political organizing happened around the culture as well, which I found, just kind of, a really interesting part of the exhibition, really. The quote that you were talking about earlier is from Abdullah Hussein, who says, "A few hundred of us paraded right through white territory down to that movie theater, and we wore whatever we pleased, coat and pants, pajama, shalwar kurta, anything. You could hear the Urdu and Punjabi film songs blaring from loudspeakers block away. A completely different scene awaited you in the theater hall. Popular film songs sung by Lata Mangeshkar, Mohammed Rafi, Noor Jahan, and others greeted you. And when the film started, it put you back in a familiar world, your own movie stars, your own language, dances, songs, jokes, the same storyline, the same scene. You felt as if you had never left your own country." Yes, and I'm thinking, I'm not sure that's a good thing,
Creature comforts.
So I think it's a marvelous show, actually. It's like the best of the social history because it gives importance to you, and to your community and your history, right? It's kind of, you're not just seeing something in London or New York or Radio City Music Hall. Kind of there were all these movie palaces here, and kind of, if you have ancestors in Birmingham, these are the places your grandparents went to and where they courted and so on. And kind of the exhibition shows it in quite a glamorous way. The photos are beautiful. The centerpiece photo of the Odeon, the Art Deco Odeon is magnificent, and it kind of dominates the exhibition, So it glamorizes people's history as well as enriching it in a very textured way.
Yeah, it's a really well put together exhibition, and very, very concise as well.
The other thing that I loved is it shows you where the first films were shown in Birmingham. I was fascinated, for example, to find out that Muybridge actually exhibited his photographs in the town hall.
I wasn't surprised by that, though. I mean, I would have thought that would be a touring sensation.
Okay, well, you see, I was surprised.
Yeah.
And I was also delighted to see those early films, you know, of the graduation ceremony from Birmingham University. I was surprised by how many women there were, actually. I love seeing the footage of the kids, from the, Blue Coal School or whatever it was, going to the pictures. Or, you know, the men returning from war, right? Like, and you see how different the city centre was then, but you still recognise some of the old buildings, right? It is kind of, you know, it's an emotive, it's history, but, you know, in a textured way that helps you learn, but that also has an emotive dimension to it, You feel touched by what you're seeing because it's where you live.
Yeah.
All right?
Very nice.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you all very much for listening. We are Eavesdropping at the Movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Audible, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud and YouTube. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com. And to just reiterate, you've got until the 30th of October to see this exhibition at BMAG. It's completely free, free entry to everything. And then you can go and get yourself a nice Edwardian tea afterwards.
Yes, lovely. All right, well, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.